Oh, no. Just everything about relationships other than romantic stuff. Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's a topic, one of the topics that came up was sex and bhakti, or sex in bhakti, or no sex in bhakti, or what about it? I'm not exactly sure what about it that they wanted me to talk about. I mean, I can speak in general. I can speak in...
So, we come to bhakti and we spread bhakti, at least that's my experience, but as we know, we all have kama in our heart and lust. That is also maybe expressed one way that we express our lust is also through the desire to enjoy and relish the opposite sex or the same sex. Straight.
Krishna, yes.
And so that's very natural, but most of us, at least in Italy, they're still a bit weird talking about it. They're ashamed, they're still, maybe because they want to pretend to be more advanced, or we're not really comfortable talking about it.
Yeah.
And so we end up maybe being at the road for 10 years and no mentor talks about it.
Yeah.
Really don't get to know your sexual energy.
Yeah.
So you struggle, or even friends to talk about it. So we really want to open it up and make sure that we discuss with
Maybe this is the wrong room to be in to really open it up. Anyway, I don't know if it was this morning. No, it was this morning. Remember this morning I was making a point that so many great sages, sadhus, were challenged by sexual desire. They're challenged by pride. It's in the Shastra says only when Krishna incarnated as Narayan Rishi, a great ascetic, only he was free from sex. And of course we have Thakur Haridas. And I was saying how the other freedom, so-called freedom, is just the ability to tolerate desires which we don't want to indulge. And the sexual desire, Prabhupada said, is connected with pride. And pride and sexual desire are probably the most difficult to control, almost impossible. So, thank you. So the first thing is that the first thing that is, as we said this morning, when the devotees, Prabhupada was with devotees and they were talking about sexual desire, and this devotee said, I don't have any sexual desire. Which is of course impossible for anyone who has a body, unless they're ill or transcendental. And then Prabhupada said, well, you need to see the doctor. So I think that's important, number one, when we're talking about any desire which is common to everybody. And sometimes you see devotees who are really good devotees, and you can tell they're, if somebody is sense-controlled, you can tell because they're pretty powerful. And just being around them, this person is in control of himself. But it doesn't mean they don't have that desire. It doesn't mean they don't have that desire as strong as anybody else. It just means they have a lot of power to control it. And then they have reason to control it, and they want to control it. So, if we don't think that way, then we think, well, the person who's controlling it has an easier time than I do, which in general is not the case. It could be, but in general, I don't think we should assume that. I think we make the assumption, because it's true, that everybody struggles with that desire. Just like we struggle with so many desires. But there's so many desires we struggle with that we know if we engage in them will degrade us, or we don't want to engage in them, they're not helpful. So we try to control them. And we try to control them to the degree that is helpful. Because if you try to control too much, then it can be like a rubber band that you control, and one day, right? So, the more sense-controlled we can be, the better. But how sense-controlled one can be in a certain stage of life depends on their age and their spiritual advancement and their desire and so many things. And so the first thing I want to say is don't compare yourself to other people for two reasons. You don't know what the other person is struggling with. You're making an assumption. In general, we make assumptions that other people are not struggling with what we're struggling with. And I have ample experience of this. And it's very unhealthy. So we should not make an assumption that even the very sense-controlled are not struggling with controlling themselves. They are. If you have a body, you have to be struggling with it. And then so if we compare ourselves to others, we make that mistake. We think, oh, they don't have the same problem I have. And then if we compare ourselves to others, someone may be more evolved, or may have a different kind of body and mind, and it needs different things. Then we compare ourselves to them, and then we may artificially try to be like someone else, and we're not actually capable of being like them. And that's a good way to become depressed. You remember? I was saying my new book, the top 10 ways to be depressed, and one of them is comparison. Compare yourself to other people. That's one of the best ways to be depressed. So I see Shan Govinda, and he's so good at this and capable at this. And I compare myself, and he's better in so many ways. That makes me feel bad, or makes me feel like something's wrong with me. And if I feel bad about myself, or I feel like something's wrong with me, then I think, well, what's the use of even trying? I can't even do it. But maybe Shyam Govind has been a devotee, maybe he was a yogi in his last life, or last 10 lives, you know. Like with Radhanath Swami, aside from Radhanath Swami's book and everything he did, he was like that pretty much his whole life, as far as I can tell. He was like a sadhu. He was always a sadhu, right? And I know for many devotees that Krishna consciousness, it's just kind of, it's how they were. They weren't devotees growing up, but they had the mentality which was like a sadhu. They just like, material things were just not like that attractive to them. And some people, before they became devotees, on their own, were following the 4 regulative principles. They made that decision. You know? It's just like, I don't want to do this. I've done it. It doesn't work. And not everybody's like that. And so when you compare yourself to people like that, you feel really bad. We told that story yesterday of a devotee who was struggling. He was falling. He was giving in to his weaknesses, and then he would get his strength and give in. And Prabhupada glorified him because he was trying. He was like struggling. So I think this is so important because we're all conditioned in different ways. So what someone can follow easily may be difficult for another person to follow, and so that other person who's following or almost following or maybe not following perfectly might be trying harder. And Krishna sees how much you're trying. That's what Prabhupada said. He said, Krishna sees how much you're trying. We see the result, right? And so the result can be like, I don't like this result. But Krishna sees, oh, you're trying. So, if you want to be kind on yourself, this is a really good way to be kind on yourself. If you're not up to the highest standard, or you don't achieve what you want to achieve, but look at your effort, look that you tried. When I was a young devotee, one devotee told me that Prabhupada said, hardly any of you will be able to perfectly follow the 4 regulative principles your entire life. And I didn't understand that, because I had been a devotee a year, living in the ashram. It's pretty easy to follow, and I thought, what's the problem? And just do it. But I came to understand that that statement is absolutely correct. For someone to perfectly follow, chant 16 rounds a day and perfectly follow the 4 principles, that's pretty rare. Even for those who made vows. But if one is committed to try, eventually they're successful. So I think the first thing is to understand, for each individual has to understand how far they can commit and what they want to commit, and what are the consequences of committing and what are the consequences of not committing. Because for every sacrifice you make, there's a payoff. And every sacrifice you don't make, there's a payoff or ramification, right? So, that's the introduction. Now let's get down to the nitty-gritty. Hare Krishna. In every sane society, in every religion, this is not unique to Krishna consciousness. In every sane society, in every religion, up till about 50 or 60 years ago, when the hippies in their sexual revolution changed everything. But up to that point, it was accepted and understood that sex is meant to happen within a committed relationship. That was just like if you say that now, people might think, well, that's like you're, whatever they think, you're old-fashioned or whatever. Or you're out of it. Or you're conservative or whatever. But it's so interesting. Society changes so much. So what was liberal 50 years ago, or what was conservative 50 years ago, may not be now. Things change. So what was extremely liberal 50 years ago is if anyone had sex, it wasn't married. That was like about as liberal as it gets. Really. And this, I don't know if you know this may come as a shock to you, but in the 1950s, early 60s, and before that, at least in America, if any young person had sex, it was like their name was like shamed all over the school. Like, you are a prostitute. That's it was just, okay, she had sex with this guy, she's a prostitute. Now, I don't know about your country, but now, if you don't have sex with this guy, they've got a name for you, right? We have an English word for it, but it may not make sense to you. So, I think it's so important when we're looking at Krishna conscious principles to understand that many of these principles are just, this is the way it's always been in human society. And our society, due to the sexual revolution of the hippies, it completely changed. And the sexual revolution meant you're switching partners all the time. It's like committed relationships. They're not fun because they're restricted. So Prabhupada came and he gives the principle. Yeah, we don't deny sex. You just do it within a committed relationship, within marriage. Now, if you want to really get depressed, then this will depress you. There's a theory called attachment theory, and it's about how children are raised. And when you read the theory, you'll realize how you were raised, probably not in the best way. If you have kids, you'll realize you probably didn't raise them in the best way. It's like a whole art and science of raising children. To create a secure environment for children where they grow up feeling cared for and loved. And Even parents who try their best aren't always good at it. But what to speak of situations where there isn't marriage, or the couple isn't stable, and they have children and they break up. And the mother is stressed, the father is absent. It's really bad for the kids. And if you've been through a situation like that, you know. If you have absentee parents and so on. So it's like so simple when you think about it. Sex is meant to be in a healthy, committed relationship where you have a stable environment for the children to grow up in, because that's what children need. They need stability. Right? A mother, a father, one place. Everything. I grew up in the 1950s. I don't know if you know what the 1950s are like, but you want to have some fun? To understand what the 50s are? Look at it, not just Google 1950 TV show. Like, I don't know what you'd call it. It's like a TV show. And you won't believe what it's like. It's like everything's normal. There's 365 days a year, right? I had dinner with my family 365 days a year. Not 364, not 365. That was just normal. My father went to work, same time, came home the same time. Everything was just regular, normal. Lived in one house, one school, everything was like... that was the 1950s. It's not like that now, at all. It's crazy. It's completely different, right? So, the sexual revolution was like, yeah, if it feels good, just do it. But look at the consequences. The consequences are children. And children being raised in unhealthy situations. It's our responsibility as parents. So we say, well, be responsible with your sex. And Prabhupada says women should be protected. What does that mean? Well, women should not be exploited. Because of the sexual revolution, the women are the ones who suffer the most. Because the women have been objectified. So men have been raised, unfortunately, to see women as objects of their sexual desire. Not objects of their protection, not objects to take care of, objects to enjoy and leave for another woman. And that was the sexual revolution. And sometimes those women got pregnant and a man was gone. That's the consequence of the sexual revolution. So to say sex is meant in a committed relationship, it's like, yeah, of course, it's always been that way. Like, what else should it be? But the hippies, they totally messed that up. And all the sexual values that we're confronting in society today all started about 1965. And I was there. I was 15 years old in 1965. I was there. I lived in California. I was in Haight-Ashbury. That's where it started in California. I saw it all. I went to the most liberal school in America near San Francisco. So I was like in the middle of watching this. And it was a complete change, 180 degrees, just changed. So all of society is being influenced by this, except for the religious people. Do you know, are you familiar with a group called Promise Keepers? Have you ever heard, any of you heard that? This is so interesting. You know, Eterna, Promise Keepers? It's a Christian group of young people who all take vows of celibacy until marriage. Promise Keepers. Interesting, right? Some of you know about the straight edge scene, right? Yeah. Shelter and that whole thing. And these kids on their own follow the four regular principles. So there are interesting counter movements going on. Kids who decide to follow four regular principles on their own who are not devotees. Christians who are taking vows of celibacy. So it's basically what Prabhupada taught. And so when I moved in the temple, then we were basically living like monks, although we didn't think of ourselves as monks, and I don't think we really acted like monks. We just kind of acted like ex-hippies with shaved heads who like to chant and dance and have fun and goof around and like philosophy and but basically we were monks. So we took vows of celibacy. And if we could do that, we were not, 99% of us were not coming from a celibate background. So to be able to do that was a great victory. And we all felt really happy. We felt free. We felt liberated. And it was so nice for us men not to see women anymore as objects of sense gratification, but to see them like mother or sister and protect them. And that was what Prabhupada taught us. Respect women. Don't objectify them. Be their brother, be their father, see them, or be like their son. So that's what we did. And then most of us did not remain celibate. Most of us got married. At the same time, we took initiation vows of no illicit sex. So then the question comes up, well, what does that mean? Does that mean you don't touch your wife, you don't touch your husband, you don't show physical affection? Well, I have good news and bad news. You want the good news first or the bad news? There are different standards. There are different standards of in household life. So one standard is you have no sexual connection unless you're going to procreate, unless you want to have children. You don't do it. And another one is you regulate, you control it. And another one is kind of you don't control it, but you control it less, but you keep it within marriage. So if it's kept within marriage, it's not considered illicit. But the Shastra says there are different results for how you control your sex. So if you go to the gold standard, which is you only do it for procreation, and the Shastra says that then you go back to Godhead. And if you control it, then maybe like once a month, then you go to Swargaloka, you go to heaven, and everything else you kind of just stay here. And if you do it outside of marriage, it's even worse. But the point is that we're trying to control ourselves, and we're trying to keep our sexual relationships controlled as possible, and within marriage, according to what you want to do now, or what you can do, what you feel is right for you. I was speaking to an astrologer. She's a devotee named Sri Radhe Govinda. Some of you may know. She lives in Mayapur, and she comes from a family of astrologers. So, when she says something, it's not like someone who just studied astrology last year. It's like she kind of grew up that way. And she said something to me really interesting. Would you like to hear it? Yeah. It's very interesting. So we were talking about this subject, sex within marriage. And I said that, when I was young, as a hippie, I had ample opportunity. And then I became a devotee, and I kind of was not really interested. I mean, not that I wasn't interested, but I wasn't interested enough because I felt better controlling it. And my wife felt the same way. And she said, yes. She said, for devotees who have that sattvic nature, it's just their nature, Brahminical, very peaceful and controlled by nature, for them, romance, honeymoon, would be like go to Vrindavan together. That's your honeymoon. Go to Mayapur, that's your honeymoon. Or you have a very romantic time, you sit down together and read Srimad Bhagavatam. That's like your romance, because you're Brahminical. And you can't be like that if you're not like that. It's just how you are. That's, you're that kind of person. You're very spiritual. You've probably been sense-controlled for many lifetimes. You've probably done everything you ever wanted to do in the material world. And so all the passionate stuff, it doesn't really, it's not alluring. You're not attracted to beautiful cars and beautiful homes, and it's just keep it simple and I'm happy. But not everybody's like that. Some people are like a romantic. more, and they need more, nicer things, and so it's not romantic for them to sit down and read Bhagavatam together. They want it, and it's not, going to Mayapur is not their honeymoon. It's like, we'll go to Disney World or something, even though we're devotees. It's just their nature, right? So, and obviously, the idea of just having sex for children, they don't even want to do it. Even if they wanted to do it, probably it wouldn't happen. It's not their nature. So the point is, you have to deal with your nature, but you can try to control it, because if you control it, it helps you progress spiritually. And it creates sobriety within the family. So when you have children, you can take care of them. So that's kind of a beginning, I don't know, it's a beginning explanation. So you want to ask some questions? Or like...
The question is there a healthy progression from maybe having more to less,
Yeah.
older, and becoming, going from maybe lower modes to higher?
Yeah. Well, it's a natural progression that even non-devotees go through. He's talking about, do you lose sexual interest when you're older? And so, well, even non-devotees lose it. If they stay married to the same woman, if they don't, and if they get a subscription to Viagra or something, they re-stimulate it. But nature has its own course. It's interesting because your procreative years are when you're young, not when you're old, right? And so we're all more attractive when we're younger than we're older, right? So I was looking at this and see how the body changes. And when you hit a certain age, you kind of, when you look at pictures when you were young, and you're like, oh, I looked so good when I was young. And now you look at the mirror, it's like, Yeah, so my analysis of this was, well, in your younger years, those are the procreating years. And if you don't look good, nobody's going to want to procreate with you. But when you're older, that's when you start to become detached. So nature just makes it easy to detach because you don't look as good and your wife doesn't look as good, and it's like, so that happens, and your body gets weaker, and your interests change, and so that's natural, and so for many people, maybe most people, if they don't have some sexual experience when they're young, they won't want to give it up. So, that's kind of the idea. But it's a little sensitive, because if you do too much, it aggravates it. If you do too little, you think about it, and you'll want to do it too much. So you have to satisfy it without going crazy. And maybe you're satisfied without it. That's fine also. These are discussions you have with your spouse before you get married. Because, we all have different sexual needs, and if you have none and your wife has a lot, it's not happy. It's not a happy combination. So, the ultimate goal, as we said, is to eventually you totally control it. And so if that's your goal, you work towards that, and that will be helpful for your spiritual life. Because Radha and Krishna, that's the supreme love. That love. And so the more we can control our passions, the more we can experience their love. That higher. That's why it said, if you hear about the gopis, it controls your passions. Because Krishna can actually enjoy love way better than we can. So, some people are celibate because they just want to go back to Godhead in this life. It's just like, I'm just going to do it, They've probably done it in other lives. But this is my goal. I want to go back to Godhead. I want to take the straight route, the toll road, straight there. So that determination, that's their determination. Other people are like, yeah, I'd like to do that, but I can't. So I have to make some concession. But my goal is to do that. And pretty much it's going to happen anyway. Yes, is that all right? Or I don't know if that was good news or bad news.
Krishna, we're thinking about like controlling the sexual desires or virginity. But I feel like that if you're not able to control, or you're not enough able to control, it doesn't become suppressing your emotions or desires.
It could be, but I believe the problem is the way we were raised to see sex. Or like the way you're raised to see anything influences your ability to control it. Because I was not raised, I don't know if you were, but my generation was not raised to see sex as something that's only reserved for marriage. And we were not even raised to think you only get married once. So I was with some Indians, and I said, how come the divorce rate? Well, it's different now, but this maybe was 10, 20 years ago. I said, how come the divorce rate is lower in India than in America? And he said, because we were raised that you only marry once. You only have one spouse. So, we are raised differently. So, whether it's conscious or unconscious, we're raised, right? Enjoy many women. That's normal, right? So the problem, what you say is true, but that culture has created that problem. Not that we wouldn't have a problem anyway, but for example, there's a man, I stay with him in India, and he's about 65. And in his university, the way it works in India, it's one class for 4 years. Men and women in one class. And he said the culture in that society was, even though for 4 years he was with the same students, he never spoke to a woman. And a woman never spoke to him. That was the culture. Because all the marriages were arranged. You weren't just, So, you can imagine if you were trained from birth that you only get married, marriage is once with one woman, sex is only within marriage, it would be a lot easier. And women were raised that way also. So even if you wanted to enjoy sexually, you couldn't, because they wouldn't do it. And just imagine you're in a society and you have your sexual desire, you're a young man, and there's no woman you can fulfill it with. They won't do it. It would curb you down a bit, wouldn't it? Yeah. So I agree with what you're saying, but at the same time, you will find that through the strength of Krishna consciousness, it's easier. You can, because your mind is focused on something higher. And when you see women as a man in terms of service, in terms of protection, that is the opposite of the sexual desire. Because the sexual desire outside of marriage is just to enjoy. They exist, I can enjoy this woman. Let me talk to her, maybe I can enjoy her. At heart, that can't satisfy you, because it's exploitive by nature. Oh, it's the church. It sounds like a guitar. These are my realizations, this is how I think, but when I first went to India, it was a much different place than it is now. And when the brahmacharis and other men would go to India, they would say, we're more peaceful here. Because they had that culture where women didn't associate. And it was just the women weren't trying to, and the men weren't trying to allure one another, because it wasn't allowed, it wasn't proper. And the way they dressed, and just the way, the vibes that were given off. The vibes the woman gave off in those days was like, don't think about it, because it's not going to happen. And you wouldn't therefore even think about it, because it wasn't even possible, and they weren't thinking about it. So there's a lot to be said about a woman's, the women's ability to control, because if they control, then the man can't do anything. I mean, of course, he could rape. That's another thing. But if the women are willing to do it, the men are always willing, right? Women are not sexually inclined all the time, but men are. So men are always ready. I don't know women if you know that, but they are. So when you're not ready, it sobers them, it makes it easy. And so I think it's just a problem of how we were raised. And so, like, for us, what is a normal sexual desire is not normal. It's been stimulated. It's been socialized. Look at how everyone dresses. We're all trying to look cool and impress the opposite sex. And that shouldn't be fostered. That should be minimized. But our society fosters it. And where is it going to end? I don't know. It's like, go to the beach now. It's like, and you ask yourself, where's it going to end? It's like, do you know, ladies and gentlemen, do you know in America, I don't know about your country, in America in the 1920s, you as a man could be arrested at the beach for walking around without a shirt, exposing your chest. You would be arrested. Did you know that? Man, not a woman, a man was considered indecent. Considered indecent exposure. If a man if you go to the gym every day and you're looking good, you want to walk around without a shirt, right? And if you got some cool tattoos, all the more reason. Yeah. So society has changed a lot. That was considered sexually stimulating. And you go back, maybe 1900s, 1905, 1910, the average woman was covered. The only part of her body that wasn't covered was her face and her hands. Everything else was covered, right up to the neck, all the way to the floor. You ever seen those clothes? Yeah? That was like normal. And if they went to the beach, I think they were wearing some kind of swimsuit that was full. So, you look at that nowadays and you think, that's so weird. And they were so sexually repressed and whatever. But the men had an easier time. Yes? What to speak of internet and pornography, which is like, just thrown it like to hell, basically. Yeah. Which is why they had monasteries up here. Right? They just, you want to be celibate, live on top of a mountain. Although Prabhupada didn't recommend that, but there's some value to that. So, I don't have a good answer for how to deal with that, but I've dealt with it through Krishna consciousness and trying to see women in a more respectful way. Because it's called samskara. Samskara in Sanskrit means impression. It means, it's like a habit, it's like an impression, how you see things, how you get culturized. So if we want to achieve something, if we want to see something different, we want to feel something different, we have to reculturize. We have to do it ourselves. So we have to see the sexual thing in a different way. We have to see women in a different way. We have to be, we have to be what's a man? What does that mean? What kind of man are you? You're married and you're looking at other women? That's not a man. Right? So I grew up in the 50s, and in my entire neighborhood of thousands of people, there was one divorce. Only one. Interesting, isn't it? So it was very stable. Because that was the social value. And what I saw, you might say, well, maybe people didn't like one another, they had to stay together, there was no divorce, it was illegal. You could make that argument, but what I saw was they had to make it work, because there was no way out. You couldn't just go, I hate you, I'm leaving you. No, you're like, sorry, I didn't mean that, let's make up. You had to make it work. And there was definitely a responsibility towards the children, that we stay together for the children. And so they make it work. So these are all things to consider. But I was going to make a t-shirt. Celibacy is beautiful. There is a book written by one devotee called The Joy of No Sex. And people will say, and in the book he said, try celibacy, if even only for a day, it will be the best day of your life. So, so people, if they find out we try to control ourselves, they don't understand it. You can just say, well, just try it. Try it for a week and see what happens, because all that energy, you don't have to expend your energy going down, you can go up. And I read that most men become successful after 50 because their sexual desire is weaker, and so they can generate now thinking and focus on what they want to do. So, interesting. And athletes also. But, the Vedic idea is that's all this energy, sexual energy, and you can use it for a different purpose. Modern society doesn't know that. They laugh at you when you say that. Say, have more sex, it's healthy. But according to the Ayurveda, it's the opposite. That's your ojas, your power. So these are things to think about that can help us. And you can kind of recondition yourself. So maybe you won't have to suppress it anymore. It'll just kind of be slightly neutralized, so it's not a problem. And then focus. Okay, this energy will be used in marriage. That's how I'll use it. That's the best I can say for now. Okay? Thank you. Hare Krishna. Oh, yes.
I read in the second canto of the Bhagavatam that the sex desire is manifested under three different conditions, which is the desire for profit, the desire for adoration and distinction. So how can these subtle forms of sex desire manifest in gross sexual desire?
She's saying, the purport is saying that the gross sex desire, when it manifests subtly, it manifests in form of pride. Right? That's what it's saying, correct?
Yes, profit, adoration, and distinction.
Yeah, there are three aspects of pride. Well, when a man has everything he ever wanted and he's super successful, and he can retire, he doesn't. Because he wants to become famous, like known, have his name on buildings and streets. And so that desire for fame it's in one sense, it's just the sexual energy in a different aspect. And or you could say it's kind of like, yeah, it's another aspect of the same thing. And when that grosser desire is fulfilled, it just takes another turn. I mean, it's already there anyway. Which would mean that if we are those who are able to conquer that sexual urge and energy, would also be conquering their pride, because they feed one another. So that's something interesting to consider, how they go together. It's kind of scary, isn't it? To think that and you might say, well, I don't have this grosser sexual desire, but I have pride. Well, it's just not manifesting grossly anymore. Or maybe it never did. It's that same energy just manifesting through pride. It's the same, like the same source in a different color, a different aspect. You know, when you want to do, I can't speak for women, I can only speak for men, but men who want to be recognized, right? They want to be recognized, but it's especially recognized by women. It's more pleasing, generally, right? Yes, men? Yes, no?
Sure.
Yeah.
When I started dating my wife, now I stopped playing guitar and writing poems. Because there was no point.
Oh, there are no other women you want to attract, yeah. Yeah. So it's, you can see the connection, right? You want to impress people, especially the women, especially the beautiful women. So the more you can impress them, the more beautiful they are. The more they like you, the better. Hare Krishna. Something like that. I mean, Prabhupada didn't explain the nuances and details of that, but we can kind of see it in just human psychology. And, I'm the body, so that's false ego. And pride is connected with this false identity, and I want people to appreciate me because it gives me gratification. And I want to be a rock and roll star also, because then you can get all the girls you want. Right? Hare Krishna. Yes. We want to impress Krishna. That tendency to want to draw attention to ourselves. Let me impress Krishna with my love. I don't have to impress anybody else. Yes? Oh.
There are statistics that...
No.
There are statistics that divorce rate within ISKCON is higher than outside the world, and some say that it is due to our no-sex before marriage, so devotees rush to get
Due to?
no sex before marriage.
Oh.
Yeah. So devotees rush and figure out that doesn't really work out. So what would you say?
That's a question for my wife. I mean, we can say it's caused by this or that, but it may not have any statistical backing. Even the divorce rate is higher within ISKCON. I don't know if that's statistically proven, but it's definitely higher than it should be. When you're analyzing marriage, but every marriage is different. And there's so many factors to what makes a good marriage, and sex is not a big one for most people. It really isn't. People make it bigger than it is, but the research that I've read, when people were asked, when you actually ask them, they say it's not a big thing. It's not a maker or breaker. It can make or break some marriages, it's true, but that's what's important to them. So that's what's important to you, yeah, but that's not going to last anyway. And marriage is much deeper than that. And in Krishna consciousness, why do you get married? What's the whole point? Like, why do you do anything in Krishna consciousness? What's the point? To be Krishna conscious, right? So, we all need sense gratification to be satisfied, but that's not the main goal of Grihastha life. Is sense gratification. Prabhupada said, in Grihastha life compared to single life, is you have a license for sense gratification. What did that mean? You can eat all the ice cream you want? That's not what he meant. I think we interpret it like, oh, I'm married now, so Netflix and chocolate. Yeah, it's bona fide. Prabhupada said, license for sense gratification. That's not what he meant. He meant that it's the only ashram in which you can have sex. Because now you can have sex which produces children and you take care of children. So, you get married because you want to fulfill your material needs within a context in which you can advance in spiritual life. Because if you do anything to fulfill your material needs and it takes you away from Krishna, how would that ever make you happy? Right? So you can have a very sensual life, but if it takes you away from Krishna, you'll be very miserable, generally. So, you can have a nice home, nice this, nice that, nice everything. But just make sure that's helping you become Krishna conscious. Otherwise, you're going to be very unhappy. Don't you think? Yeah. So, the point is, we have material bodies and we have material needs and we need to fulfill them. But the whole idea is to fulfill them in a way that doesn't become problematic for your bhakti. That's it. And fulfill them in a way that it actually helps your bhakti. Right? Otherwise, why would you do anything? Just to do it. It doesn't make sense. It's very much like eating. You eat until you're full, and once you're full, you stop eating. And after that, it's just not healthy. Right? And so you kind of know. You're eating, thinking, have I eaten enough? And you think, well, if I get up from the table now, in 2 hours I'll be hungry, and they're not serving prasadam for 5 hours or 4 hours. So I have to eat a little more. And then you eat, you kind of tell. Right? Like we have breakfast at 9:30. We have lunch at 1:30. So you kind of eat enough to be okay till 1:30. And if you eat too much, then it's not healthy and you won't be hungry. Right? So sensual life is like that. Like, how much do I need? How much is enough? And maybe for me, I only need this much and you need this much. But for both of us, it's just what we need. So it doesn't matter that you need more, it's just what you need. Some people have bigger appetites and they can digest more. So it's not a problem. It's just a problem when you go beyond what you need, it's not healthy. And then you become unhappy. Yes? It's actually quite simple. I once gave a class and I said, everybody has a 0 point. And the 0 point is like, how much materially do you need to get to 0 so you're satisfied? And in Alachua, when Ambarish Prabhu first moved there, Ambarish bought a house kind of near where I live. It was a very large, beautiful house, beautiful estate. And you might look at that house and think, wow, that's such a beautiful house. And I think for him it was just like normal. That's just normal, So his zero might have been a 10 for you. My scale, that's a 10. That would be like more than I need, or I would be somewhat maybe bewildered a little bit to have something that nice or whatever. But for him it's normal. It's just how he grew up. So everybody has a 0 point. And that 0 point is, this is what I need, so now I can focus on my Krishna consciousness. And everybody's different. And it doesn't even mean one person's more Krishna conscious than another, necessarily. You want less, but maybe that's how you were raised, and it's like, you're just okay with that. Or maybe you're a very simple person. There's a lot of very simple people out there who are not very spiritual. So, you shouldn't feel bad if you need something. You should just feel bad if it's more than you need. If you like feeling bad about something, that's something you can feel bad about. Yeah. So in that question, well, you could say, well, how much sex is enough? I don't know. That depends on what you need. Some people don't need any. Some people need more. But it shouldn't be more than you need to be satisfied and progress gradually so you can become detached at some point. So, because to be detached from all desires that are not healthy for us is the ultimate goal. Right? It's nice to be in control of yourself, isn't it? But you can't control what you can't control, and then to artificially try to control what you can't control is not healthy. Wait till the GBC hears this lecture. They're going to give me my walking papers. No, it's a problem. I think it's a problem. This has to be discussed because this is just real. This is how it is. And, the highest standard is just for children, once a month. After chanting 50 rounds. If you can do that, go for it. And if you can't, then, do what you can. But keep it within marriage. That's the idea. At least that. Otherwise, you don't have human society. That's what Prabhupada said. You ever hear Prabhupada say they're having sex like cats and dogs? Yeah, what does that mean? There's no commitment. And one time the devotee said, Prabhupada, these humans are lower than animals. He said, no, they're not. The animals aren't having abortions. The humans are... No, what did they say? No, they said, they're like animals. He said, no, the animals are better. They're not having abortion. So, it's like you need to reorient the culture. We need to reorient culture within our consciousness of what is right and standardized. Because modern culture has different values and it can really confuse you. Right? If you don't agree with what I'm saying, raise your hand and say something. I'm happy to like.
I just want to ask, is it possible that energy to fully resurrect somewhere, like in creativity, like
Yes.
fully?
Yeah, it is possible. Maybe not for everyone immediately, but to some degree. That's what we're doing. Yeah. Anything is possible. What makes things possible is your desire to that's one of the foundations, that you really want to do it. What's physically possible? I don't know for you, but I just know that if your desire is stronger, more is possible. That's for sure.
It's like I heard somewhere that this energy is like creative energy in its essence.
Yeah.
Is it true?
Yeah, it creates life. But that's what I was saying, that many men become extremely successful when they, their sexual urges start to diminish. And they take that energy and they can focus that energy on higher things. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. It's like, what do you think about all day? You want to think about the direction of your life, and if you're not sense-controlled, then you'll get diverted. Sensual attraction will pull you somewhere where you don't really want to go. But if you control yourself, then you can go where you want to go. Right? Yeah. Who has the mic? Yeah. Oh. You want to say? Or Matura Nath wants to say something.
My 19-year-old daughter, she opens up a lot and she kind of tells me all the tea, gives me the inside information.
one of her friends, who's 19, she's getting married. She just got married, so they can have sex. And they've been in a relationship for several years, but they're 19. They don't, they're not very mature. No, devotees. Yeah, so, I mean, they're not telling anyone that, but my daughter's very close with her, and she knows the scoop, like, yeah, they're basically getting married, so they can have sex. So, my realization from my own life is actually my first marriage. I'm divorced now in another relationship, but my first marriage was arranged. And just I'm getting a realization from the class that the parents who were arranging the marriages, they were very carefully considering the nature of their child and how to match it with another nature. And so they did that very expertly, of course, because they cared so much about their children. When I got arranged, it was not a good situation. They were trying to hand a girl from India over to me. I was a brahmachari. I wasn't even had much desire to get married, but they were saying, yeah, you should get married, and it was just a huge mistake. And it was a disaster. So there wasn't much consciousness behind it. It was actually a lot of ignorance. And she had been through a lot of abuse. And I had no idea what I was getting into. They actually lied to me about things. They said she was a very committed devotee. She ain't 16 now. She wasn't even chancing. So my recommendation to all of you is to be very careful who you get involved with. And really, really look deeply into that person. Don't just, because when we're in the mode of passion, we're thinking, yeah, I want to enjoy it, so I'll just blindly get involved, I'll blindly jump into this. But if we can come to a sattvic place, the sattva means light. We're seeing the light, shine the light on things. And we're considering both myself and the other person. So, and then it's also, the relationship is meant to have for affection. It's not to try to enjoy. Because if I'm thinking I just want to enjoy, it's usually, we're not going to start a relationship in the right way. We're going to get involved in kind of in a meshment in something that becomes, that won't last usually. Some thoughts.
Thank you. Shishi Gornitai ki jai. Sham Govinda, we have kirtan now? Is that the plan?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
So, and maybe we can keep on discussing tomorrow, this time, or another time.
Yeah, my wife's coming tonight. You can ask her all these questions. Just, line up outside the room.
Yeah, very, very relevant, very, very interesting, and so thank you so much.
Yeah. So on Monday, then she can talk about the marriage now. So someone can lead. I'm trying to save my voice.
You don't want to